Me?
Fel, if he's there. Fel, are you there?
Yes, we're
No,
still
that's
having,
okay.
we're still having a little difficulty here, so but we'll get it going.
Okay.
Our dear God, Lord, we gather again to study your word of equality, sexist, feminism. And Lord, as I will be presenting this study this afternoon, number 4 and 5 of Tamina's presentation, I pray for great wisdom and make these words come alive, that it will be effectual, and give us better through, hopefully, Lord, through these presentations, that you'll work in our hearts to understand equality better. So as we present, as we discuss, we pray, Lord, that you'll guide our thoughts, guide our minds, stimulate our minds, give us understanding, and may our conversations be the way that you would have us go. So just pray for that we'll figure out these technical difficulties, so we get these presentations going. Thank you, Lord. In Yeshua's mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Do you need somebody to share screen for you?
Well, don't know yet. I'll try it.
Okay.
I tried it this morning and it seemed to work. So let me try it again. So I'm going to share screen. Says you cannot start screen while other participant is sharing.
Oh, nobody's sharing.
Nobody's sharing?
Yeah, nobody's sharing screen. Oh, wait. I am, sorry.
Okay.
Turn it off after the music. I stopped the music. Okay, now you can.
Okay, so let me try it again. There we go.
It's always different when I just do audio versus the whole video. And so I forgot it was still on screen share.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, and we see it.
Okay, good. So let me hide some things. There we go. Okay. All right, so this is part 4 of How Do You Know If You're Sexist, done by Tamina, December 4th, 2021. So during the camp meeting, there we go. During the camp meeting, we traced the steps how to get to heaven. We saw that it is essential to understand the subject of the nature of man in order to understand correctly what it means to have a new heart, when Ellen White talks about a new heart. So in review, what is a new heart? It's a new mind, new purposes, and new motives. These are functions of the higher nature. We need a new heart in order to get to heaven. We've traced the steps how to get a new heart. We see the importance of the nature of man study. We looked at how habits and characters worked. All the steps that has been developed to reach heaven is nothing if we don't have the concept of the source, the standard, and the person constantly comparing and contrasting themselves to the standard and believing in the source. So here's, so we need to understand the nature of man. And we actually need to understand all the components of this diagram here. So that we need to understand the nature of man. We need to understand what will is, and what the choice is, what habits are, and how to change them. The character, what is character, and how to change the character. A new heart. Well, now we know the new heart means. So what does a new heart mean? I mean, what is it? What is a new heart? Anybody?
From last night and what you just read, the new purposes, new motives, and a new mind.
Yeah. So that's a new heart. Then we see when we have a change of character, we have the seal of God. Then we go to heaven. But as we know, we put diagrams in simple prophetic manner like this, but we know that it's much more complex than this. There's interplay in all of this, because we always have in every step we always have a will, we always have a choice. Do we want to change our habits? Do we want to change our characters? If the moral standard is too difficult, do we want to go back to Laodicea? So, there's interplay. It's not just so straightforward. There's always interplay because we do have choices. So generally,
So, Phil,
yes.
thank you. So you're saying, if I'm understanding right, and it sort of fits with what I think, but just run it by you. So so I can look at my life and I can see the changes in my life, right? But they're ongoing changes. So this is not just one process you go through from nature of man to heaven, if you understand what I'm trying to say. It's repeated each time you come up to something, maybe where you have to practice turning your will for something new maybe that's brought to your attention, right? So then you'll have to work on that habit for a character change in that aspect. So it's not like it's just you go through each step and you're finally then sealed one time. It's sort of a process that's repeated again and again. Would you say, in a sense? Do you know what I'm saying?
You're precisely correct, because the standard is always changing. The standard is becoming higher and higher because God is constantly developing our character. So in order to develop our character, we have to change our habits. Like, for 2019, being a sexist was okay. Being a conservative was okay. But now the standard comes higher, and God says, well, what was okay yesterday is not okay today. Uh, so if you want to change your character, here's a new moral standard. And now you have to work on your habit of, and even the small things like we discussed last night, calling your wife or your wife, calling your husband, even the small things like that, even calling, God Father, it's, those are habits that we've had for, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And so I know that when I listen to other presenters, they still say our Father. And how long has it been since, we shouldn't call God Father anymore? It's been months, but still, just very recently, I was listening to someone and that person still says, begin the prayer with our Father. So habits are very difficult to change. So you have to constantly work on your habit, and you have to use your slow brain. You have to use your willpower to constantly change your character. And we talked about fitting through the holes. And eventually you might come to a hole that's too small because you don't want to change. You don't want to give up what you had. And in that case, you're not going to make it to heaven. So you have to change constantly. So you're precisely right in your.
Amen. Thank you you have a really good way of explaining, Phil, and retaining the information clear from the night before too. Thank you.
Yeah, one is glad to be of service.
Hey, Phil,
Yes.
I just wanted to add that, obviously you have to start out with understanding the correct nature of man.
Yes.
That's imperative. And if you understand that, then you will then correctly understand that we have a power of choice.
Yes.
And aligning our will with God's will. And when we do that over the course of time, as you're suggesting, we're going to come higher and higher and higher by developing the habits we should have. Our character is going to continue to change, and we receive that new heart, and we end up with the seal of God, and we go to heaven. And so I just see it's almost like you have to, the crux of it is you have to understand the nature of man. And if you do, then you will understand the power of choice. You will start to make choices that are going to affect your habits, which affect your character, which affect the heart you're going to have, which affect whether you receive the seal of God and you are going to go to heaven. So it's a beautiful process, and it's something that we have to understand. It's like God isn't done with us yet, but we have to have the right methodology to even to come to the right conclusions. I mean, you can use the wrong methodology and still come to some of the right conclusions, but eventually that methodology, if it's not the right methodology, it's going to lead you into a bad place. And understanding the nature of man correctly is going to give you the ultimate victory. And so, yeah.
Yes. So that is very correct. So yeah. So just imagine. So we're part of the 144,000, and our character is constantly changing. And as we have discussed before, when we see the implication of teaching Moses, teaching Abraham, our character, developed much further than they did. But up to that point of their understanding, their character, they were able to receive a new heart and a seal of God, and they're going to be in heaven. But in heaven, they're going to come to a character where they died. So their character, as we teach them, will continue to grow until God, and it will continue to grow, and everyone will continue to grow infinitum.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So these are beautiful comments. Thank you. So if you are an expert in knowing how to change, but you do not know into what you need to change into, the understanding of the steps to heaven doesn't do you any good. On the other hand, if you know the moral standards very well, but you don't put it into your life, it doesn't do you any good either. So here we were talking about how there's interplay in this simple diagram. So these two concepts, the mechanism for going to heaven and accepting the source, as well as changing oneself to reflect the standard, they complement each other. They need to go hand in hand. We need to emphasize how important it is to understand the nature of man. So again, that's imperative, as you said, Bob. It's to understand the nature of man, as well as the study of the moral standard. Of the three, the person, the standard, and the source, which is the most fundamental one? The one that we should labor with other people if we want to reach others. It's the methodology. So that's where we say we have the methodology to continue to develop the character. But that's where we need to, when we tell people, because they have their own methodology, that led them toward the wrong conclusion, and we have the methodology. They believe what they believe because of methodology, their methodology, thus saith the Lord. We believe what we believe because our methodology, even though the source is the same, it's the methodology that is different. Okay? So the source, our foundation, is the methodology, it's the lines, the parables. That's how we came to our conclusion. That's how we developed the moral standard. And then the moral standard developed the habits of human beings. But we have to constantly go back to the moral standard because the moral standard is constantly changing. But God is patient, that he doesn't, change the moral standard nilly-willy on a whim. He's very careful on when to change the moral standard so that we as slow human beings can rise up to it if we choose to. Any questions on that? So it was mentioned at the CAT meeting that the point of the argument is the standard. But the problem is that our foundation, the methodology and the lines is not the same as the other people. Because we have a different foundation, we will come to a different moral standard. We're trying to fight with the people on their moral standard, and this is inefficient. It would be more effective if we would labor at the point of the source and make people aware of their sandy foundation. We make people aware that their foundation is built upon sand and call them unto the solid foundation. When you're able to bring the people higher unto the solid foundation, then bringing them to the higher present truth, moral standard, would be much easier. This was mentioned at the CAT meeting, but it bears repeating. We are all part of an information war which is the last conflict between Satan and God. Everyone who is participating or watching this video has chosen to be part of that information war. Therefore, we should be trained in how to fight in this war, and we should be careful with our resources and how to use our weapons. We're speaking in the parable of the warrior, which the Bible gives us. So in the mechanism for going to heaven, you need to bring the subject of the nature of man into your life. How to make a long and lasting change into your life. Not based on the lower nature, but based on the higher nature. Understanding what it means to have a moral standard and how it is created, you first need to agree on the source of inspiration for your moral standard. When you have the source, then you need to get to know the moral standard, and what makes it difficult is that the moral standard is a work in progress. It's constantly a call to come up higher. And the last step is to compare and contrast the moral standard to your life. Let's examine the moral standard more closely. So let me ask you a question here. The moral standard, does that change over time or not?
I'd say no, but I'd say that the I don't know. I struggle sometimes with expressing. We see clearer what the moral standard is. Our view was dimmer before. It's not that it changed. We just weren't able to see all the fine details and points as clearly. But as we get drawn closer and the focus gets clearer, then we're able to see the moral standard for what it is. So I don't think it's really changed. I just don't think we had a full view of it.
Okay, I can understand your explanation. Anybody else have a different explanation?
From our view, it appears that the standard is changing because, as was just pointed out, at any point in your life, your perspective is limited. And as your perspective grows, the moral standard appears to change.
Okay, so these are two very good observations. So can we say that God's moral standard never changes, but how and when it comes to our life changes? Can we say that? Because we
Yeah, I
see,
think so.
okay, because now we see more clearly. Okay,
Yes.
so for the argument's sake, in human perspective, that it does change. Now, what about our foundation? Does that change?
No,
No. Okay. So even in human perspective, our foundation does not change. It's always been line upon line, parable teaching. The methodology, the foundation of our methodology never changes. So unlike thus saith the Lord, it's inconsistent. Our methodology is consistent. Correct?
correct.
Okay, good. So we're on the same page. So how do we get to know the moral standard? The premise for this discussion is that we're all standing on the same foundation. In order to talk about the standard, the expectation is that everyone is believing in the correct methodology. The methodology and the line upon line and the parable teachings and the rules that come with it, this was the first message given to this movement. This message was to understand how we should approach inspiration. We have been trained for 30 years to trust that methodology. That methodology is our firm foundation. We should have no problems accepting the standard because it's based upon the source, the methodology. As we already studied, people reject the standard because they are uncertain about the methodology. They are not true believers in the methodology. This is why they doubt all the rest.
Like the dog that returns to its vomit, people return to their Laodicean condition. This study is presented with the premise that all are standing on the firm foundation of our methodology. The next step would be to get to know the moral standard. We need to get to know the moral standard. How do I get the knowledge regarding the moral standard? We believe in the line upon line. We believe that this is the present truth. We want to go to heaven, and we want our lives to change. How do I know what I have to change into? We begin with the premise that we know how to read. We take two truths. In every dispensation, more is expected of us, and there's always a leader. How do we get to know the moral standard for this dispensation? So we have the moral standard, and we know the mechanism of how we change, and we know the mechanism how to know what is the right moral standard. We need the methodology, and when we trust the methodology, we can trust the moral standard. Then we can bring it into our habits. By now, we should know the mechanism. First, we come to know and trust the methodology used to develop the moral standard. Then we need to understand the moral standard for our dispensation. How does that work? For example, if you want to do a heart surgery, what would you have to do in order to know how to do a heart surgery? So you want to become a doctor who performs heart surgery. Everyone knows that we cannot just open up our bodies and just do a heart surgery. First, we need to gain some knowledge on how to do heart surgery. So we have this person There's an action that this person wants to do. In order for us to do something, we can do the heart surgery. The next step we need is to gain knowledge. When we receive the knowledge, we come to an understanding. In order for us to perform an action, we have to have the knowledge, then understanding, and then we can act upon it. If we want to do some action, like heart surgery, building a house, driving a car, etc., the first step is to gain knowledge, understand what we've trained, and then put our understanding into action. This is how we change our lives.
So you have this person, okay, information, it comes in and she's thinking about it. So so how do I perform a heart surgery? That's your end goal. That's your action. That's what you want to do. Right? So first you have to gain knowledge, a lot of book work, but knowledge is not enough. You have to understand. You have to understand. Understanding is more than just knowledge. To know and to have information, that's just knowledge. But what do you do with that is understanding. So once you have the knowledge and the understanding, then you can perform an action. Whether it's to perform heart surgery or drive a car. So any question on this? So in order to change our lives, the first step is to gain knowledge. Let's come back to the model of source, standard, and the person who wants to live according to the moral standard that the lines teach us. What is the first thing we need to receive? Knowledge. Then understand the knowledge. Then put into action what we've learned. If I learn how to drive a car, I need to learn the rules of the road, how to behave with other drivers. When you learn how to properly behave on the street with other drivers, do you think that once you have your driver's license, you can say, I can now forget everything I've learned, and when I get to the traffic light that is red, I just ride through it? Of course not. The knowledge that you have received and you have understood, if you're honest about this, will change your life. You cannot go back to the original state.
Can I say
If you
something on
are-
that, Phil?
Sure, yes.
Thank you. So, when I first became an Adventist years ago, okay, I learned how do I put this? Okay, if someone would say something to me and I'd say thank you, they would correct me. No, you don't take the praise. Give the glory to God. So you learn to say praise God instead of thank you. If you're following what I'm trying to say, you begin to learn the language that's accepted within the structure. And I can honestly tell you that I learned that language, but it hadn't become me. If what I'm saying is making sense. I learned how to fit in, how to drive with the other drivers, but it wasn't really changing me because it was just an act, so to speak. Because there were times I wanted to say, thank you. It's not that I didn't want to praise God. Of course I did. But it was like, it seemed you couldn't express yourself without people having, I don't know, a religious
Piety?
heavy hand. I don't know how to, yes. And what was really sad about the whole thing was when a new person would come along, I became that instructor, just like they'd instructed me, right? I became the heavy hand. And the girl who had come in with the open heart, right, was now becoming the, it's terrible how you learn that. I just don't ever want that to happen again. And sometimes I understand these truths, but they haven't all become a part of me yet, but I pray about it, right? Because like this says so clearly, you can have this knowledge, you can have this understanding, but it has to digest within the cells and in your brain. It has to become a part of you so much that it's natural, that it's not a forced learning, so to speak. I sure hope what I said makes sense.
No.
Was it clear?
Yes, yes. Does anybody want to comment on what Susan just said?
Well, what I thought about was like it ended up being like a form of godliness when I think about it, because you well, like you said, I can relate to Susan in that sense. So I think we also have to just keep in, like, be aware that we can, you know, be in danger of that too, you know, having this form of godliness, because we have the, you know, like God is on our side. We're this, like, quote, the special group and his special little flock, and we can just, you know, be growing pride with that, you know, in the sense that we forget what our mission really is and what God expects of us. So that's how I understand it, like kind of like getting a little prideful. So that's what I thought. I don't know.
I really like what you said about the form of godliness. That really says it in a nut. It's what is it? The form without the kernel. You don't have the true seed within, really. It's just kind of painted on, and you've learned this behavior and how to interact, but it's not real. You're an actor. You're not the real deal. You're a counterfeit, you know. And to be the real deal, it's it's no joke, you know. And but yeah, thank you, Ava. That was very nicely put.
Yes. So yeah, thank you. Anybody else?
The more you perform a correct action, a right action, then as you alluded to when you first started sharing, it leads to you doing it almost second nature, and you're doing the right thing. At first, you have to do it, you know, step by step, doing it methodically, and knowing that it's the right thing to do. And as you keep doing the right thing with the right motive and the right methodology behind it, it does become second nature, and that's how your character is formed.
I was thinking also,
Amen, Bob.
yeah, I was thinking also about last night when I brought up the question about Jesus in Gethsemane and got up and did the will of the Father, his choice. And based on what Bob just said, is that by doing God's will, along in the little things that we learn, prepare us to be able to do his will on the big things, becomes nature to do his will.
Okay, yeah. So these are all very good contributions. So thank you. So let's bring that question, Susan, to what we're learning now. And what I mean by that is that where did they get their moral standards from? So they say, you know, if you say thank you, you don't say you're welcome, or you say praise the Lord. Don't give glory to man, glory to God. Where did they get that moral standard from?
That's Ava's bull.
Yes, that is true. But I mean, in the context of this study, Anybody? Where do you get your moral standard from? I mean, how did the South, how did the South justify slavery?
Oh, thus saith the Lord. Is that what you mean? Through the
Exactly.
reading, through the way they interpret it.
Exactly. It's thus saith the Lord. Because, you know, we are always learning something new. Like you had to learn their language. And then you taught that language, like you said, to somebody who knew coming in. Well, we're learning new languages too. But our language is from a firm foundation that never changes. Where thus saith the Lord, it's inconsistent, where our foundation is firmly consistent. It's methodology. So we too have to learn new things, but we know where our methodology, where the new moral standard comes from. It comes from the source, the firm foundation, the methodology, and that's where the difference is. Ours is consistent. Thus saith the Lord is not consistent, and they have to show piety by, you know, saying those kind of expressions. Does that make sense?
Yes, very clear. And so true.
So I have a question.
Yes.
All these comments are very good. Just makes you think even more. So before we even knew this message, where does our morality come from?
Our morality,
Yeah, our moral standard.
our moral standard. Anybody want to answer that?
Ten Commandments.
Okay, Christina, you were very low volume, but I believe you said the 10 Commandments.
Yes.
Okay. 10 Commandments. Anybody else?
Well, I was thinking that. Sorry, go ahead.
I think it came from our wrong interpretation of the Bible and spirit of prophecy.
What was that again?
Methodology.
Yes, methodology.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Is that
That I was thinking we've learned it from the prophetic lines, because I remember they said that it's the prophetic lines that will bring about this change on your morality. So it's more like, and when you're looking at the prophetic, you know how they say you have to look to Christ, right, in the church, but they have no idea what we're looking at. And it's Christ. The lines are Christ, because he's showing us his character, and that's what develops all of this that you're explaining, Phil, the understanding which produces the action. But I don't think we focus on morality. We focus on, maybe I'm wrong, but we focus on the prophetic message, which changes our morality. That's how I understood it. I'm glad Jackie brought it up.
yes?
Maybe somebody can clarify it.
Yeah, I
Yes,
have
I
a
would
comment
also.
to that, because, if we never knew this message before, and we didn't have any Christianity, then where does our morals come from?
I would also add that I think it's I remember a presentation from a while back where it was phrased the mystery of godliness, and how the line upon line is revealing God's character, and us understanding these lines, it transforms our character, and that's where we get our morality. and that's the way that takes place, and the way that's accomplished is the mystery of godliness. I don't know if that
Yeah,
makes
that's a
sense,
good
but
comment. I would say, though, it's a progression, because it doesn't happen like that from the beginning when we don't know what this message is teaching, and all we have is a standard to go by if we aren't even raised Christians, and just regular Christianity out there. That was my question. Where does that starting point come from that leads us to where we are now?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Because Elder Parminder once said, okay, let me ask you the question. Let me ask you the question that he said. Do we need the Bible for morality?
No,
yes.
No.
no,
No?
no, no, because it's already there in our conscience of right and wrong.
We know right and wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there was a lesson done a while back where there was a bunch of phrases taken from the Spirit of Prophecy, where Sister White would say phrases such as, if brother L or brother this would only have been able to see this or that, then his mind would have been opened up and he would have been able to see the whole picture. He would have been saved. So, and they took it back to, if we reject any parts of this message, it closes chambers in our minds to where we can't see any further. So the way I understood it is, every step of the way, the Lord puts these nuggets of truth that we are to understand. And when we do so, then our minds are opened up, the chambers of our minds, to where our character is transformed.
Yeah, but going back to what Jackie said, though, she was talking about people that aren't even Christians. I can relate to that because I wasn't. How do they know, right, Jackie?
Yes, exactly. And we see this with Nephilims out there.
Right.
This is
Okay.
where we'll be taking the message to them. And that's why I find it a very interesting thought, because we should know where they've come from, because God is already working on their minds and hearts with the external in the message.
Yes.
So in that thought, then, my thinking and even asking this question is, because I was not raised a Christian, and I went through 2 steps, Adventism to independent Adventism to here. And so, I find it very interesting how God is working, just amazingly so, on the hearts of people that have no idea of this message. And we are being prepared so that we can reach them with the spiritual part of this message. So for me, I feel very strongly about understanding where they're coming from so that I can reach them better, if I could say it in that way. Somebody else might have another thought on this, but I find it very interesting that Elaine, her life, she was never connected with Christianity either, nor was I. But it's been a progression in her life, just as it has been with mine, although way down the road, I had to go about 35, 40 years before I found this message. So from the young to the old, and I am old in years. So, but, as I think about it, and with these studies that we're receiving now, that Phil is giving us, or sharing with us, and Logina, it's a process. And if we are progressing as God is leading us as individuals, step by step, then we're going to understand exactly how he's leading us. And and how he wants to use us. That's the whole purpose. He wants to use us to help others.
Amen.
So that's our role. That's why the third angel's message is so important, because it is, come out of her, my people. I mean, the people are deceived and they don't understand the truth and completely, although their hearts are being worked on. But in our work that God has given us, this is what he's readying us for very, very soon. And that's why the importance of the third angel's message is absolutely priority. It is in my life. And that's where I'll kind of leave it now. But I find the question of morality and where it took us to, as I was relating it right now, step by step. And I see it in my own life. So it's a beautiful thing. Absolutely. And it's from God. Absolutely from God, when there's so many religions out there that are so confusing, and people would say, oh, why are there so many religions? You believe this, you believe that. It's Babylon. Babylon. And that's what God wants to call people out of, is this false knowledge of God, so that they can truly see God as he is, a God of love and yes, equality in every way. So I just say amen to these studies and what God is doing.
Yeah, I think it was
Amen.
Phil that brought it up, that it was in Portugal. I think it was you, Phil, but it was in Portugal where Elder Parmenter said that the Nethinims, they know right from wrong. It's they don't need the Bible. They don't need the 10 Commandments. People out in the world don't need the Bible and the 10 Commandments to know right
Yes.
from wrong.
Absolutely.
Amen.
If I may add,
Amen.
that actually reminds me of a quote in I want to say Desire of Ages, and where Jesus talks about the sheep and the goat, and he says that some of them will have no theoretical knowledge of him, but will have kept his 10 commandments, and they will inherit the kingdom of God. So that just came to mind as we discussed that.
That's true. Beautiful.
So what Ruth just shared brings me to love thy neighbor, because isn't that what the people are doing that you're mentioning, Ruth? They're exemplifying love to their fellow man without really, they don't know about the Sabbath or the first 4 commandments. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It actually says that they keep the 10 commandments. I mean, the teacher is nature, and when you look at nature and how nature is interrelated, everything is made for the other. Everything is I think one of the quotes is that everything is miraculously made for the need and happiness of the other. And when you look at nature, when you look at, for example, the rain cycle, um, one has to, there's evaporation from the sea, then there's the clouds forming and they go inland, and all that. Everything is just connected with the other. And when that is cut off, when you're not, thinking of your neighbor, for example, if you're not putting them ahead of yourself, if you're not loving them, then that cycle of life is broken. I don't know if I'm making sense, but that was my understanding of that. So yeah.
Yes, that's what I thought too. Thank you.
Wonderful contribution and good points. Thank you.
Okay, continuing on. The knowledge that you have received and you have understood, if you're honest about this, will change your life. You cannot go back to your original state. If you are sincere about wanting to change, the natural result is that your life can never be as it was before. You need to understand the importance of gaining the correct knowledge. As a young person who cannot drive a vehicle, you can say that gaining knowledge and understanding are not important. I'll just get the car keys and drive. How far do you think you'll get? Most young people will fail, especially when driving a stick shift. What is being emphasized here is that you might be motivated to do the action. You might be motivated to live according to the moral standard. But if you fail to receive knowledge and understanding, the motivation to live according to the standard will be shortly lived because you will fail. The message runs with the same rules as everything else. If we want to get good at something, we need to be professional. If we want to be professionals, then we need training. In our training, we receive knowledge and understanding. With much patience, we become professionals. With much practice, we become professionals. This is the same principle when it comes to the moral standard. We need to become professionals, experts, in living according to the moral standard. You cannot become an expert, however, if you don't have the knowledge and understanding with some level of training. So how do we receive the knowledge regarding the moral standard? We know already that with each passing dispensation, more of us is expected. The moral standard is a high calling, and it keeps growing. The other point is that there are leaders. Let's get practical. We have the study of equality, specifically the line of Eden to Eden. Who is presenting the line Eden to Eden and equality? Elder Tess. How does she do it? How does Elder Tess teach this movement? What medium is she using? Through presentations and media broadcasts. How do we get the moral standard? By following the leader. Who brought us the updated version of the moral standard? It was Elder Tess. And how does she do it? By presentations and media broadcasts. These are the two ways that she's bringing the message to us. If we want to get to know the moral standard, our first priority should be to watch the presentation and read the article she's sharing. This is the most important, the most essential thing that we can do. We need to follow the leader. Now, people will come who do not believe the methodology that we use today. I'm not going to follow a person. Who do I follow? The Bible and Ellen White. Okay, go to the Bible. Tell me, how does God work with the people? Go to Great Controversy, page 343, paragraph 1. God's dealing with men are ever the same. There is no more truth clearly taught in the Bible that God uses people for his tool. Let's look at the Bible. In the time of Jeremiah, it was safe not to follow and not to.
Was it safe?
Oh, thank you. In the time of Jeremiah, was it safe not to follow and not to listen, Jeremiah? No, it was not safe. In the time of Jeremiah, everyone had to listen. In the time of Elijah, everyone had to listen to Elijah. In the time period of Christ, everyone had to listen to Christ. God chooses a prophet. A prophet is simply a tool in God's hand, and it is never safe to reject that prophet and not listen to him or her.
So when we come to the Millerite movement, God chooses Ellen White, and it would not have been safe not to listen to her. Today, we might be okay with Ellen White because she is since long time dead, and therefore we can accept her. But Ellen White, all her life, was she accepted by her own people? No. From the beginning to the end, it was a struggle. They even sent her away to Australia. When God calls a prophet, it is almost certain that this prophet will be rejected. If you believe in the methodology, if you have a solid foundation, you need to accept the prophet. Rejecting that prophet will not be good for you. Most likely, many will reject the prophet. God's dealing with men are ever the same. If you believe in the methodology, if you believe in the Bible and Ellen White, you know that you have to accept the leaders. If you want to get to know the moral standard, you need to do is to watch the presentations and read the media broadcast. Now we have a problem with the nature of man. People listen and they read. After 2 years, what do they say? I don't understand sexism. What does it mean to be a sexist? I don't see any sexism in my life. It's the fault of my wife. Men are stronger. Men have physical needs. How can it be that after 2 years of study of sexism and equality through presentations and media broadcasts, all that comes out of our mouth is still sexist? We seem to have no clue as to what the moral standard says. The problem is the nature of man. We know that we can listen to presentations, we can read the media broadcast, gain knowledge, but we don't understand. We need to have understanding. If knowledge has not turned into understanding, then we sit here after 2 years of teachings on equality, and we still have no clue of the moral standard, because of what we've heard and what we've read goes in one ear and out the other. What is the problem with the nature of man? The problem is not that Elder Tess has not spoken enough. The problem lies with the people. If you today say that you have no knowledge about sexism, you need to look for the problem in you and not to the leader. Except that you are in a different language and you don't have access to the presentations and the media broadcast. But here in the Western world, there is almost no excuse because presentations are being translated. And there are programs to translate the articles. So the problem lies within that person. What happens when we get knowledge? Elder Tess's presentations are filled with information. Watching them once is not enough. There is information overload. Our brain can take only so much new information. We go through these presentations, but we understand maybe half, if that much. Do we take time to study these things? Or are we listening to our presentations on the way to work with 1.5 speed? If so, we are not concentrating when we are listening to her. First problem, information overload. Second problem, are we concentrating when we are listening to her? Third problem, our own bias. We have our own moral standards. We have our own ideas and thoughts of how the world is run. Instead of having the mindset that I, the student, have to unlearn and sit at the feet of Elder Tess and learn everything, our pride comes in between. Then we say, oh, that's not too bad. This is a little bit different. It's a human natural law that when we compare and contrast ourselves and we find differences, the human being is trying to excuse oneself. And that can be in very subtle form, almost invisible small detail. When Elder Tess comes and holds the moral standard in your face and says, look at this, change your life, and you feel touched, your first natural reaction is that you make excuses for yourself. However, what does the Bible and Ellen White say? God needs to break our hearts. When a heart is broken, it's time to rebuild. But the problem is, every time Elder Tess is trying to break your heart, she says, look at the standard and look at yourself. We excuse ourselves. In that moment, the chance of breaking our hearts is lost. We then need to wait for the next moment when she makes a new attempt. Yeah, so any thoughts on what we read thus far? So I just want to make a comment then on this breaking of your heart. Elder Tess, like I said, in humans, from human perspective, the standard changes to where now we can understand it, and we have to get a new heart. And so Elder Tess, she's trying to break our hearts so that we can have new purposes, new motives, new mind. And if we don't get our hearts broken and get it repaired with new purposes, new mind, new motives, then we harden our hearts and we are stuck with a wrong understanding. And so then our life does not change. So I don't remember what study this was, but I do remember Elder Parminder, that is, he was, I don't remember which study, but what he said basically is that when an information comes to you, so we have two streams of information, right? The correct and the incorrect. So when you hear the correct information from the, let's say from the right stream, and you hear the correct information, but your mindset is still on the old information. Your mindset is still stuck on a knowledge that you had before. You're still a sexist. You still believe in patriarchy. That'll lead you to death. Or even as something I thought it was benign, is that it doesn't touch your heart at all. So you're not exactly agreeing with the old standard of patriarchy and sexism, but when you hear the murders and the oppression and the things that men do to women, as we read in the Uyghurs and the incels, if that doesn't touch your heart and you're neutral, even though you may not agree with it, that'll still lead to death. And this is what Elder Parminder said. So we need to have our hearts broken. We need to have our hearts touched. So here, Elder Tess she's constantly, going back to the standard. And this is what Tamina is saying. She's Elder Tess is putting it in your face and says, look, you change, you live. I want you to live, change. And if we don't come up to that higher standard and we don't let our hearts be broken, then hopefully there is that next opportunity. Because I think that in some writing in Ellen White, that opportunity may not come twice. So this point is very, very critical to understand.
Plus, it's painful to have your heart broken like that.
Yes, it is painful, but it's better than being crushed.
That's right. So it's not a pleasant experience.
No, but we need it if we want to.
It's an experience that is necessary.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unlike anything else that we in life. Let's take something familiar in this world. Driving, football, any sports. If you don't learn from your mistake, and that's what the heartbreaking is, you're never going to get better. Okay. You're just not. And as people, we're going to make mistakes. It's just human nature. We're going to make mistakes. And according to Elder Parminder, it even sounds like when we get to heaven, we're still going to make mistakes. And we have to, we can't quit. If you want to be a top fit athlete, you can't quit. You got to learn from your mistakes, and you adjust, you change, and you get better. And you know, I've learned once that the distinction between being the best of the best and being just best is 10,000 hours. So what I mean by that is there are, you know, there are few that make it to the top, whether you're an entertainer or whether you're an athlete, and the 10,000 is the 10,000 hours of practice. That's what differentiates from the best of the best to the best. It's the 10,000 hours of practice.
And failures,
And
mistakes, failures and mistakes and being corrected, and that'll, yeah, because you can't do that in any work. I mean, my work that I've done, not these years, but back when I worked at Nordstrom, you aren't going to keep climbing higher if you don't learn as you go along the way, the things that you're doing right, good, the things that you're not doing right. Humble yourself and correct them, and you'll continue to climb higher.
Yes. So this is the same here. You know, the standard changes. We're going to have our hearts broken. If you, and the whole premise, I think the whole premise, the basic question, yes, it was, how do you know if you're a sexist? But I believe it started out with, do you want to get to heaven?
Mhm.
That was the basic fundamental question. Do you want to get to heaven? And so if you want to get to heaven, you got to have your heart broken from being a sexist. And she's drawing out the mechanism to know if you're a sexist or not.
You know, I don't know if this relates, but what came in my mind was the thorn in Paul's flesh. You know how he wanted it removed, and I think it was, anyway, I was thinking it might have been from the third heaven, which made me think of the third angel's message. Anyhow, I don't mean to be off track, but that's what kept him from ever getting prideful, because it was a constant reminder. You know, because you were talking about the race. We might be limping in the race. You know what I'm trying to say? Some of us might be faster runners than others. Some of us might be limping because of the thorn. But whatever it takes, right? To get there. Anyway, that was just a thought that came in.
And we keep moving forward, don't we? So the problem, however,
Amen.
time is running out. 2 years has already passed, and not everything can be repeated. If you believe in the methodology, you will accept the leader. The problem is that many people do not like the leader. In interactions between human beings, if we have a good relationship with someone, you will most likely take in everything they say with a positive bias. If you have a good relationship with someone, everything they do, you will have rosy glasses on and try to think positively about it. On the other hand, what happens if you have a dislike towards that person? Your glasses won't be positive. They will be negative. So you will listen to the presentations with a negative mindset. If you have a negative mindset, will you accept anything? Probably not. This is not to say that we need to love Elder Tess, but we have to consider the problem that after 2 years of this message, we're so behind in the understanding of this message. It is probably because we do not accept the methodology, nor do we accept the leader. We don't watch the presentations nor read the media broadcasts. If we do watch the presentations and if we read the media broadcast, then the problem of the nature of man interfere with our thoughts and emotions. First, information overload. Watching one time is not enough. Then, are we concentrating when we listen to the presentations? Thirdly, our own personal bias can interfere with our learning the message. If our heart is attacked so that it can be broken, we make excuses for ourselves, or we have our own bias towards a worldview, or we have a negative perception about the leader, and therefore we have prejudice against our presentation. All these things block us from truly understanding what we should be learning.
What is being taught is the moral standard. This message is a matter of life and death. When we receive the knowledge and we understand it, our lives can never be as they were before. This is what is happening in the presentations and the media broadcast. If you understand certain things about sexism, if you watch the presentations and the media broadcast with a correct mindset, your life will change. It's inevitable. So the first thing we need to do is to watch the presentations and read the media broadcasts. If we don't understand the message, oftentimes it's because we have a problem with the messenger. So information overload, not concentrating, having our own bias against the methodology or the messenger prevents us from learning and understanding the life-giving message. Before you make excuses for yourself, every single one of us has all three problems. We don't do enough to acquire the knowledge oftentimes. We say we don't have the time, and when we do study, we don't concentrate, and most certainly all of us have some sort of bias. When these presentations touch our hearts and expose our sexism, we make excuses for ourselves, or we downplay it to make it look more harmless, or we have a dislike for the speaker. We don't have to like everyone, but what we should be aware of is the nature of man. What is the natural result if you don't like someone? The glass you have on will be negative. And the problem is with these glasses, you cannot have them on when you listen to these presentations or read the media broadcast if you really desire understanding and you truly want to change your lives. The fourth one, we don't like to get our hearts broken. No one likes to be broken. No one likes to admit that they've been wrong for 20, 30, or 40 years. No one likes to admit that they are the persecutors. No one wants to admit that they are guilty. So finally, let your heart be broken when the information comes. Do not try to make excuses or try to prevent your heart from being broken.
So she just identified what the breaking of your heart is. No one likes to be broken. No one likes to admit that they've been wrong for 20, 30, or 40 years. No one likes to admit that they are persecutors. No one wants to admit that they are guilty. So that having your heart broken is having to find out the character defects that we have.
Yes, you have to admit to yourself your character defects.
So let your heart be broken when the information comes.
Yeah. Let your heart be broken. Exactly. When the information comes. Yeah. Or, I think there's, okay, I'll save my comment for a little bit later. I think she explained something else. So if you already follow the presentations and read the media broadcast and you do it right with the right attitude, then do research. There she is. Okay, this is what I wanted to get to. Research by watching documentaries, by reading books, documents, etc., that are pertinent to the subject. If you correctly follow the presentations and read the media broadcast, these being the most essential, if you do these right and you still have some time, then you can do some research. Research on the subjects that were presented by Elder Tess and what she puts out to the media broadcast. There is much truth, but God's people needs present truth. It's not time to fight about the daily sanctuary service, Sabbath, etc. These are all good truth, but what we need is the present truth. So the comment I was going to make paragraph earlier, but I saved it till this paragraph, is if you already follow the presentations and read the media broadcast and you do it right with the right attitude, then do research. So in part 5, the next part, it's already 2:50, so I'm not sure we're going to get to it. But in part 5, it's going to describe a little bit more about how your habits develop, of our brains, our neurons, our neurochemical pathways, how our habits create a pathway. So that's how it becomes habits. Repeated actions create a neural pathway to our brain, and therefore it just becomes habitual, and you might not even realize that you're doing it. So 20, 30, 40, 50 years of being in this habit, and we don't want to get our hearts broken. We've been in the wrong camp for that, that amount of time. And so, we've developed this brainwave pathway, neural pathway in our brain that, fast thinking, fast brain. And so earlier, I've also mentioned about Elder Parmender saying that if you don't, you don't even have to be in the wrong side of the issue. If you don't feel anything, then you're still lost. You got to feel the right thing. And so, so it depends. It depends on, what you were brought up with, how much negative stuff you were brought up with, how much how much neural pathway your brain has developed for you to break your heart. So for me, I grew up with pretty much a lot of negative things. So, it took this movement to put my heart on the right track. But what Elder Parmender said has really been stuck in my mind, that if you don't feel bad about the wrong things, you're still lost. And that has haunted me ever since I heard that, because I know I'm not supposed to feel good about the bad things. I know that much. But not to have my heart touched is, I was still lost until I did the extra research on the Uyghurs and the incels. I mean, that's when my heart started breaking, really breaking, because I really didn't know how cruel men can be to women. And so So my suggestion is, if you're still in that middle ground when your heart is not broken, and for me, like I said, I was exposed to pretty bad things. So, just like you hear in the media all the time, we're desensitized. I mean, you hear it. So because I've been exposed to pretty bad things in my childhood, I've been desensitized. And my heart only broke when I went beyond what I was exposed to, because I really didn't know how bad men, let's just say men, could be towards women. And so that's when my heart really, really broke. I mean, when I think about it, it still brings tears to my eyes. So my suggestion to you men is that if you're still in that middle ground where you don't feel bad about what sexism is all about, then do the media broadcast and do the research on it. And like I said, if it gets to your heart beyond what you've been exposed to, that's when you break your heart. But that's when it broke my heart.
I think I said this before, but
Yeah.
with everybody knows, I think my dad passed away a little over a year ago now. But during the time after my mom passed away, there was about 5 years in between, and I went down and would visit him every Sunday. And in the beginning, I'd take him out, we'd go have lunch someplace, or I'd pack up everything and take lunch to him or what have you. Then he got to where he really didn't want to go anywhere. It was just getting too hard for him to go anywhere. And like, he's hard of hearing. He has vision problems. So it's kind of really hard to communicate. The only thing really to do that he would want to do would be sit and watch an old movie. He enjoyed doing that. I could care less about the movie, but things that I saw that I never would have thought of when I was younger, because the incel stuff made me think about a lot of the stuff that how I was treated, my naivety and weakness and insecurities and all that. But when I put myself in the place of that young girl, where these are the movies that as I'm watching an old Doris Day movie with him, some of us have been around in the movie time, some of us haven't, an old Rock Hudson and Doris Day movie, and watching it's the same story every single time. It's the man playing those manipulative games to get what he wants. And here's my dad loving it. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, you were supposed to protect me. You were supposed to teach me. And this is why I'm not blaming it all on him. I don't mean it that way. But I'm just saying that it was entertainment for people to watch that behavior. And it was sad to see it. It was sad to sit there with my dad in the few years before he passed away to realize how much entertainment that was, to watch how a man manipulates a woman to get what he wants.
But that's what we were taught. We didn't know any better.
Yeah. And it's very sad. So it's been very eye-opening being in this movement and learning what we're learning. And I came out of that a long time ago and became a completely different person, a turnaround, and don't take anything off of anybody anymore, when I went through that whole process. But that's what people grow up with. And some people, like I was saying last night, some people never come out of it. That's why it can be painful to hear that, because it's something they haven't healed from. So it's like wounding them all over again.
So true. And no one wants to admit they're guilty, like was written there. That's a really hard thing to admit, that your mindset, is broken. Because who really cares to admit defeat, right? almost nobody does. So it goes against our natural instinct, and unless God can reach us in that place. And that's even the first step. Like when I went through the AA program, that's the very first step. You have to admit your defeat, that you can't do it. Your life's unmanageable no matter how hard you try, right? And it's so true that until you get to that place of humiliation, it's like absolute humiliation, until you get to that lowest possible step, then you can actually be moved towards liberation and strength, you know? And it's a process, but like was said in here, many of us make excuses for ourselves, and then it can't reach us, right? Well, that's the way I was raised, or that makes me more comfortable, or whatever is the excuse. But until we can admit our complete defeat by it, right? And for you, like Thalia, by reading that, it by what you said, but when you read that, it really hit you harder about the incels, which made me think of the angels when Christ was crucified, because many of them still hadn't completely seen where Satan's war against God was going to ultimately end. And a lot of people, they just can't see where this is going to end, right? They make excuses for it. Well, it's not that bad or whatever. But anyway,
But that
you
broken,
know,
being broken is necessary. You know, when I came out of the emotionally abusive relationship, and the years, many years later, I mean, in the course of those many years later, I always said that I don't regret that I went through it, because it was necessary to get me where I'm at today. And that today changed over the years, but it was necessary. It was an experience that I needed to get me where I'm at today. So that's how I always kind of viewed it. But everybody has to come to that place. That was a hurt situation. In looking at the context of this, it's that we individually in this movement have to be broken. And it was you, Susan, I think, that just said it, how the angels didn't even fully understand. We're living that out here in this movement as we speak, that there are people still don't realize what is happening.
yes, that's how I see it too.
The present truth is what God's messengers are teaching us. This should be our focus. If the present truth is studied correctly, it will give us the moral standard. When you do the research, you research on the present subject, the present truth. What might be a problem with the research? When you research, you will have biased glasses on because you don't know what is right and what is wrong. So when you research, absorb like a sponge historical facts and events, but be careful to say what is right and what is wrong. The person who studies, which is us, we need to be most critical about our understanding of things. Why would that be? Why should we mistrust ourselves so much? So here's a parable. Person has a staff. Oh, there we go. Person has a staff in one's hand. What else does he have? Sheep. Can the sheep trust themselves? No. They have to trust the shepherd. That's why we need to be critical about ourselves, our worldview, the relationships, knowledge and understanding, etc. We need to trust the shepherd. It doesn't matter if you like that person or not. We need to trust in the methodology. This study was presented under the premise that we believe the methodology and the lines. You need to see that God has once again established a leader, a prophet, a shepherd. You need to know the shepherd to understand. You need to follow the shepherd to understand the moral standard. When you do research, do not trust yourself. What or who else should you not trust in the parable? You cannot trust yourselves, and you cannot trust other sheep. The other sheep is just as stupid as you. No offense intended. We need to trust the shepherd. This is the parable that the Bible gives us. When it comes to the moral standard, do not trust yourselves and do not trust your fellow sheep. Trust only your shepherd. The relationship is the third point of super importance. The relationship between the sheep and the shepherd. How does the sheep know what is right and what is wrong? By having a relationship with a shepherd. You ask the shepherd whether this grass is good or bad. Is this water good or bad? The good shepherd will tell you whether this is good water or bad water, if this is good grass or bad grass. In summary, we have learned at the camp meeting the steps to how to have a new heart. We can continue to speak about heaven. The study on the need for a changed heart means nothing if we don't understand the process between you, the moral standard, and the source. You need to have a moral standard in order to know what to change into. How does the moral standard come about? By making sure that you have the right source. The right source will give you the right moral standard. Then you need to compare and contrast yourself. Everywhere, you can fall off the path. At every step, you can fall off the path. You know the moral standard. But you don't know how your heart has changed. Conversely, you can know the process of having a new heart, don't have or know the moral standard. You can try to live by the moral standard, but not trusting the source. You can know the moral standard, but you don't compare and contrast yourself to it. You can try to listen to the presentations and read the media broadcasts, but have no understanding, and therefore, you fail to have the proper action. Hopefully, you can appreciate how complex the study is. Beginning with the study of the nature of man in 2017, this presentation is a culmination of 4 years of study. Many people left the movement over the study of the nature of man. When the update of the standard was given, more people left. People who remain to accept the new moral standard, they have a problem with compare and contrast themselves to it. In every dispensation, there's the shaking. The standard would always be continually refined. When we understand the methodology, when we accept the methodology as a divine inspiration for the moral standard, our next duty is to get to know the moral standard. We do that when we follow the leader that God has chosen. In every age, God has his prophet, and in every age, God's people required to follow his prophet. Our first duty is to get to know the moral standard by following the leader. Presentations and media broadcasts. Then we have the problem with the nature of man and how we work. Too much information. We need to repeat and repeat and repeat. Watching Elder Tess one time is not enough, especially while driving and listening to her at 1.5 speed.
Information overload is our first problem. Second problem is the quality of our studying. Are we concentrating or are we stressed? Do we take the time? We won't take the time to study. We are satisfied with a superficial understanding. The third problem is our own bias, personal bias towards our worldview, our lives. If you tell someone that they are a sexist, there will probably be a pushback beginning with some excuses. Perhaps you have some bias against the messenger. It doesn't matter which one you have. What matters is that you are aware of it and act accordingly. Choose to act against it. The fourth problem is that you don't want to get your heart broken. The problem is, how do you get to receive a new heart from God if you don't allow him to break your old heart? God cannot give you a new heart unless the old one is broken. So we need to let our old hearts be broken. We need to understand that we are sheep and not shepherd. We are students who need to have knowledge. We need to sit at the feet of the shepherd and learn. If we don't have that attitude that we are the ones who need to learn and take in what she says, it is not us who needs to tell her something. We need to be careful with that. There are 4 reasons that prevent us from understanding what she is saying and teaching us. If we deal with these 4 problems, maybe we will learn more from her presentations and the media broadcast. In the spare time that we might have, do research based upon the history of the topic of the presentation. It's present truth that we need. So research the topics of the present truth. Be careful when we research, because the sheep should not trust itself. When you research, get the history, but first learn the interpretation of the history from the presentations and the media broadcast. Lastly, we need to watch the development of our relationship to the shepherd, whether it's going toward a positive direction or not. The relationship between the shepherd and the sheep should be positive. Don't trust other sheep, trust the shepherd. Going one step further, in the beginning when Israel came out of Egypt, who did the majority of the work, taking care of the sheep? Moses. Was Moses, however, able to take on the work all by himself? No. So what was God's plan with Israel? Over time, the burden became too heavy for Moses. What was the solution for that? What happened when the burden became too heavy for Moses? Jethro, his father-in-law, helped him to develop an organization. You have small shepherds organized beneath the big shepherd who would help in taking care of the sheep so the work can be done more efficiently. The same happened to Adventism, the early Christian church, as well as this movement. The work of organization is still small in this movement. However, there are shepherds implemented to take the same function up and down the ladder. So you have Moses and the leaders under Moses. Today you have the leadership and then leaders underneath the leadership. It goes up and down. When you are a sheep, when it comes to knowing what is right or wrong, don't trust yourself and don't trust the other sheep next to you. Trust your shepherd, trust the leader. This presentation is not about having a big list of what is right or what is wrong. The reason for this is because people are in situations and circumstances which are different to the circumstances and the context of other members. Every situation must be individually viewed. If we create a list of negatives and positives, people would just take the message black and white. This could result in the loss of part of our methodology to consider the context of the members. This is why at the level of the movement, we keep to the presentations and the media broadcast as taught by Elder Tess and connect it with a moral standard. Equality, sexism, homophobia, nationalism. When it comes to a personal sheep, and you want to know more specifically pertaining to your own individual life, you need to be aware of the relationship with the shepherd. Amen. Any more thoughts out there? Contributions? No? Yeah, so Now, just to reiterate, it all starts with knowing ourselves, knowing the nature of man. We have that saying, things begins with a thought, then habits or actions, repeated actions, habits. Then habits form character, and character form your final destination. And so, the first question that was answered is, do you want to get to heaven? And so from that study, this study came about because this is one of the moral standards. It's sexism, apis bull, patriarchy. And so we need to clearly understand how we develop character, our thoughts, our feelings. Are we affected? First of all, are we on the right side of the issue? And when we hear oppression and atrocity towards minorities, are we shaken? Are we affected? Or do we just think nothing of it? No feelings? Or worse yet, on the wrong side of the issue? So there's a lot of things to consider. But the important thing is when a new standard comes, we compare and contrast ourselves with it because our methodology is firm, our foundation is firm, our messengers were chosen by God. And so we need to respect our messengers, our leaders, all the way up and down, as she said, and trust our leadership and have our hearts broken. Because that's the only way. God has every right. Because God is our creator. God has every right through the parable of the potter. The potter has every right that when the clay, making a vase, and it's misshaped, he has every right to crumble that vase and throw in some more water or throw in some more clay, whatever it takes, and to make it good again. And so that's God's prerogative. But at the same time, if we harden our hearts, he can't do it. He is limited, unfortunately. I've always thought that. Unfortunately, he's limited because sometimes I wish I was a robot and he'd just pull my string and I can do the right thing.
It's our choice.
But it's our choice. And I don't know, and we got to make the right choice to have a heart broken. And we have to will ourselves to have our hearts broken. We have to, because we don't have to enjoy it. We can do the right things without enjoying it. And God will give us the grace to enjoy it so that we continue doing it and it'll become second nature. That doing the right thing will become our habit. So we don't have to think about it anymore and we'll just automatically do the right thing. Now it doesn't mean that when we're confronted with something new, that we shouldn't search it out. We should, but once we know that that's what God wants, that's what the moral standard is, we need to have our hearts broken again and continue changing. And that's where dying to selfishness and pride daily and hourly comes in, and that's what we have to do if we want to get to heaven. And by now we should have the right understanding, the right view of what heaven is like.
Thank you, Phil.
One is glad to be of service.
This was very good study. I thank you very much. We definitely don't have time for number 5. So we'll work that in, you and I, with next week.
Yes.
So I know that part 2 is a little bit shorter to what I'm doing. So we'll see how it works out. Maybe we can work it out.
Okay.
So let's close in prayer, or have prayer, and then. Holy God, it has been a difficult day, a painful day. And I pray, as this study showed us, the pain would break our hearts and bring us to the right way that we need to be. It's fearful to see on the line what happens during the formalization. But I pray that we can trust the lines, that the lines are teaching us that the shepherd is called his prophet. His prophet is our shepherd. The shepherd is guiding and directing the setup of this structure and this organization. And it's my prayer that we follow that setup and that organization and trust it. We ask you for your grace and forgiveness for any dishonor we may have caused you here on this Sabbath day. And for your guidance and direction for through the difficulties that we face. I pray for all of this movement today. I pray for this fellowship. I pray for each and every one of us. For it is clear that we see a division. May our hearts be broken to understand where we need to follow. Thank you for hearing and answering our prayer, and I ask in Jesus' name, amen.